Okay, welcome to my critical thinking project 2. My name is Kate Brunel. Um, and for my project, I decided to assess Alex Forrest, Alex Forrest from the 1987 hit film Fatal Attraction. Okay, so a little bit of an overview about the movie. It takes place in New York with some very prestigious people. Alex Forrest plays a 40-year-old white, single, hetero woman who works as a book editor. Um, in the movie, had a kind of work event to get together. She has run in with a man who is a prestigious lawyer of the law firm. His name is Dan Gallagher. Um, they have this first kind of meeting. It's kind of very prominent, very noticeable. Alex immediately has this like attraction at first sight. Um, Skip forward a little bit, and Dan's having a meeting at his office. Alex just so happens to end up being the editor that is there for the project that they're working on. So they kind of run into each other a second time, right? And after the second run in, they kind of, after the meeting, meet up downstairs. They go out for drinks. They start talking. Dan confides in Alex about his wife and his 6-year-old daughter he has at home and all of these things. It's kind of just fun, innocent banter for a little bit. And then it kind of turns, and Alex kind of really persuades Dan into having an affair with her. And they end up having this like weekend, very short weekend affair. But in that short span of the weekend, Alex forms this almost immediate, extreme obsession over Dan. And the whole movie kind of is just about all of these. Um, Events from starting from her obsession, her immediate attraction to the obsession to stalking and just kind of a string of violent and tragic events throughout the whole entire movie, which are all in Alex's attempt to kind of keep Dan from leaving her and ending the affair, right? So from the context we do have from the movie, it seems like Alex has very little to no friends, and she has no family that is seen in the movie interacting with her or involved. Um, at one point in the movie, Dan plays a joke on Alex while they're at the dog park with his dog, and he kind of lays down and pretends to be unresponsive, in which Alex runs up. She's kind of freaking out. She's like, "Oh my God." And then he kind of sits up like he's joking, and Alex gets very intense, very serious. Like her face changes really quick, her mood changes really quick. She goes, "That's not funny." Like she goes, "My dad died of a heart attack in front of me when I was 7." But then shortly after this, she starts laughing and says it's a joke. But later on in the movie, when Dan kind of enters into her apartment and he's going through her stuff, he finds this article where we find out that indeed Alex's father did die in front of her at the age of 7. Like I mentioned before, she is single, she's 40 years old, white, heterosexual, cis woman. She has no children. She has a very demanding, and she has a very demanding career, which I think her lack of community and family, mixed with her demanding career, and it um it kind of adds on to her feelings of emptiness and loneliness. Um, Alex kind of like on a surface level when you first meeting her, when she's first meeting people, she kind of puts on this like facade, right, of like a fake personality of who she is, or it might be one of her personalities or something. Um, but on a surface level, on the outside, when you first meet Alex, she's a beautiful woman, she's attractive, she's very charismatic, she's very charming, she's very flirtatious. She also has this like mysterious component to her. She's very alluring to men. Um, and we see how she can use her actions, her words, and things like that. She's very persuasive. She can be very manipulative. She can tend to get people to do what she wants them to do by using manipulative tactics. Um, and part of this is her ability to quickly get others to open up to her. So we really see this with Dan, right? She's very pushy with him. She's asking him a lot of questions. She's asking him about his life, about his past, about his hardships, the things that he's dealing with, right? And she doesn't give anything really, like there's almost this facade they kind of get like kind of know her. Dan kind of knows her maybe, but she really does not give any information. She's very closed off about her personal self. She's very closed off about any information about her, about who she is, the background she comes from, all of that stuff remains a mystery. It's hidden. She doesn't open it up, she doesn't share it. Nobody knows about it. Um Another thing that we really see a lot here is Alex's mood really fluctuates and it's extremely rapid. It's not just I felt this earlier in the day, now I'm feeling this. We're seeing in the moment, second to second switches. So literally talking happy and then all of a sudden volatile, angry, screaming in your face. Um, and we see very little emotions from Alex. So throughout the movie, the only emotions that I could pinpoint seeing her having are happiness, um, anger slash rage. It's mostly really rage, and then deep sadness and emptiness, it seems. And those are really the only things she shows throughout the whole entire movie. So, with the little context that we do have about Alex, which I will get more into that a little bit later. The diagnosis that I would give to her would be borderline personality disorder. So there's a few things on reasons why. So let's start. One of the first criteria she meets is the fear of abandonment, which is a very big characteristic in BPD, correct? So we really see this a lot with Alex's attempts to keep Dan in the relationship. As soon as she gets the notion that he's kind of like leaving or trying to end the affair, we see her kind of pull out all these stops, right? With the stalking, the repeated phone calls of his phone. And I'm not talking just a few times, like I'm talking probably hundreds and hundreds of time, and not just to your house, your personal phone. We're talking work phone. The man changes his number, she finds it again. So this is very continuously um pushing because of her fear of being abandoned and left by him. Um Another thing um that she does that we see here is at one point in the movie, Dan's apartment is for sale because his wife doesn't know, but secretly he's trying to move them all away from her from the situation. So at this one point in the movie, his apartment's for sale. It's listed, right? Okay, so Dan's at work. He comes home. He walks to the door. He hears Alex's voice talking with his wife. So at one point, Alex poses as the prospective buyer for his home, shows up at their apartment while he's gone. His wife is the only one there, and she pretends to view this apartment like she wants to buy it with his wife, and then tries to kind of form a some sort of type of relationship or bond with her, right? To kind of just stay relevant to the situation, to find some type of way for her to be able to possibly stay with Dan and in his life and a part of him. Um, Another thing she does often is threatening to tell Dan's wife about the affair. So when he makes propositions to end the affair or leave, she kind of threatens him with, "Well, I'm going to tell your wife. So either you stay in this and you risk it, or you're going to leave and I'm going to tell her anyways, and things are going to be ruined for you, right?" Another thing that she does in attempts to keep Dan to stay is telling him that she's pregnant. Now, in the movie, it is never verbally or hard fact verified that Alex actually is pregnant, but when the part where Dan comes into her home and he finds that news article obituary about her father, he also finds pregnancy tests in her house. And there's just kind of like with the context of what's going on and around the movie, it kind of leads to believe that Alex actually is pregnant. Another criteria that she really hits the mark on for borderline personality disorder, according to the DSM-5, would be unstable relationships and sense of self. So this is a really big one here. Um, from what we see, Alex really has no other relationships with anybody else besides Dan. Okay, he's her whole center. That's everything. Um, her relationship with Dan even started out with her knowing that he has a wife, knowing she was the other woman, and still kind of pursuing it with the possibility is going to be unstable and volatile very high. Um, from the concept text that we get, I kind of get the sense that Alex kind of really struggles with who she is as a person aside from her career. We really see her fluctuate with a grandiose sense of self, like in her moments where she feels um, nobody can stop her. She rules everything. It's her way or the highway. Dan's wife will never be better than her. No other woman's ever going to be better than her. She's the one, you know. So we see this really heightened sense of self and who she is. But then we also have this other aspect that we see often from her, right? Where we can kind of get the sense that she's distraught, she's lonely, she's struggling with herself, her image. She's struggling with her worth, what she deserves. Um, and so it's kind of always like this flip-flop back and forth, back and forth. Um, and kind of just like the feeling that like, yeah, he's gonna leave her, his wife and his child for her. Um, we also see how in certain moments like one moment she's telling Dan that she loves him and she can't live without him, and then he'll do something that pisses her off or makes her angry, or he says he's going to leave, and then all of a sudden it's like a flip just switched, and now all of a sudden she hates him and she's going to kill him and ruin his life, and he's the most terrible person ever. So she really goes back and forth from this obsessive feelings of idolizing Dan and being so overly in love with him to just tremendously hating his guts, and he's the worst person she's ever met, right? So she's in this constant battle back and forth of she also doesn't know who Dan is. She doesn't know she loves him and he's a great person. She doesn't know she hates him. Um, And clearly, from the behaviors and things that we see with the stalking, all of these, her relationship with Dan is not just a relationship. It is very volatile. It is very toxic. It was never just a simple attraction or a basic relationship from the beginning. It was a very extreme and very dangerous obsession that she had with him. So everything like in her life in this movie is centered around Dan and keeping a relationship with him and her relationship with him, and what is Dan doing and what can I do to keep Dan? Why does Dan want to leave me? Like, how can I keep Dan from leaving me? Um, Another criteria we see is this self-harm and suicidality. So one of the major scenes where it's kind of in your face with this, um, is when the first time at the end of the weekend affair that they have, that first weekend together, the second time meeting, um, we really see this in this scene because Dan, the weekend's over, wife's coming home, he's getting up, he's getting dressed to leave. He told her, you're such a great person. This has been really fun, but like I think I really messed up here, kind of is what the gist we're getting. And like we can't do this again. This is over. This was it. I'm done. You're a great person, but I got a wife. And so in this moment, almost immediately when Dan sees this, this is when we see one of her extreme in an instant mood shifts where she went from being happy and content, they just had intercourse, they just had this great weekend together, these dates, she's feeling lovely. All of a sudden he's leaving her, and then all of a sudden, boom, she's raging, she's mad, she's freaking out. She starts pounding on his chest, she's screaming at him, she's holding on to him. She even at one like his physically ripped his clothes, trying to keep him from leaving her house. Um, so really, really just acts acts out, right? And then eventually Dan kind of finally gets away from her. He's making it to the door, and within seconds, all of a sudden, we go from this raging upset, want to hurt you, to all of a sudden her whole demeanor, tone, everything changes, right? So all of a sudden you hear Alex, she's very soft spoken. And she tells Stan, she apologizes, I'm sorry, I don't know why you did this, da, 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 da. Can we at least be friends? Can we end this on a good term? Can I at least get a hug? And so at this point, this is when Dan turns around to give Alex a hug, and she puts his arms out, and this is when he realizes that she had slit both her wrists in an attempt to keep him from leaving her. So this is one of those really big instances of self-harm that we see her take part in because of her behaviors due to her diagnosis and her fear of abandonment. Um, there is a lot of speculation in the movie regarding whether she was doing this to kind of try to commit suicide or for attention. Um, it's very obvious that she wasn't trying to kill herself. She was just trying to make Dan feel bad by hurting herself, um, and kind of scare him with the idea that she might kill herself so that he felt like he couldn't leave her there alone. He needed to be with her. Um, and we do hear a few times throughout the movie where she does threaten suicide to Dan. Um, And on another level that we see is throughout the movie, she always has nicotine and alcohol. So I don't really know her habits because I mean, we see this in these instances. These can also be because they're social situations and dates she's going on with Dan and stuff. It may be just social. So I'm not going to diagnose her as well with a substance use disorder because I don't have enough information to do this. These behaviors may be social, but um, from what I can gather, I think that nicotine and alcohol may be a little bit of a crutch to her in helping her deal with others, society, and even her own self when she's alone. Um, and then also another thing that is also a self-harming behavior, but maybe a little bit more subtle to other people, because I think when people hear self-harming and suicidality, they immediately go to thoughts of suicide or self-harming, like cutting, withholding food from yourself, eating disorder, like that type of self-harming behaviors. I think that when people think self-harm, those are immediately the things they think about. There is also some other subtle behaviors that are self-harming that even may be subconscious. So one of those behaviors that's a little bit more subtle that I picked up on was the fact that Alex very quickly had unprotected sex with Dan, who was virtually a stranger to her at the time. It was only her second time meeting her, which, do you, girl? I'm not one to judge nobody, okay? I'm not going to judge somebody for having sex on the first date, second date, whatever. That's your thing, that's your life, do it. But I think it's a fact of the unprotectedness. So there was no protection. There was no sharing of STD screenings or any kind of health concerns or anything like that, which we can be very harmful, right? And we've learned in class that having multiple sexual partners or things like, you know, um, I would say unprotected sex with a stranger, would be a form of self-harming behavior, whether she realizes it or not. She's putting herself out there, leaving herself susceptible to harm, to disease, to possibly being raped or assaulted or things like that, um, to kind of fill this void that's inside her of being lonely. The next criteria she kind of touches bases on is some interpersonal aspects. So we often see her struggling to empathize with those around her. We actually, I don't see it throughout the whole entire movie where she does empathize with anybody. It's kind of all centered around herself and her feelings and her thoughts. I think that her emotions and what she has going inside and what she's feeling in her head is just so intense and so much. She kind of doesn't really have that capacity to think about what anybody else is going through, right? Because what she's experiencing, what she's feeling in these moments, it's so detrimental. She can't focus on anything else outside of that. So, we really see this here, and I think especially one of the big ones, which we're going to get more down into here in the bottom right, is like Dan's emotions for one. I've never seen her throughout the movie. She never acknowledges his emotions. She never acknowledges him being kind of like upset, except for like reacting with her anger and things like that. But we really never see her acknowledge any of Dan's emotions. She kind of actually really disregards his emotions and his situation with his family. And it's kind of like, screw you. I don't care what you have going on over here because you're pissing me off. You hurt me, and now I'm going to hurt you. And I don't really care how you feel because you hurt me first. And because you hurt me, and now I have to do this. Um, Another one. Okay, so I kind of lumped three of them together because all of these kind of examples I'm going to give you here of her behaviors, I think a lot of them, most, if not most, all of them can kind of be interchangeable between these three categories of diagnostic criteria. So I kind of just lumped it. I I put them all together in one. So that would be things. These are all these examples I'm going to go over are going to show her meeting criteria for points of negative affectivity, psychoticism, and antagonism. So we constantly see Alex struggling to control her anger and rage. Really, we don't see her control it at all. Like as soon as she gets mad, she gets angry, she's acting out in the moment, and she's doing these behaviors without thinking them, without processing it, fully acting off of emotion, what she's feeling in the moment. Um, when we see Dan first leaving, this was one of those acts that I just went over, her that I talked about in the self-harm category when he first tries to end the affair and she's freaking out, ripping stuff off of him, slits her wrists. Um, that is a good example for these categories. Um, I think that her calling Dan repeatedly, like of hundreds, probably hundreds of times, finding his phone numbers. Um, And when she does this, she's always leaving hateful and threatening voice messages. She physically stalks Dan on multiple occasions. On the first occasion, she pours battery acid all over his car, and then she follows him home. She's watching him through the window with his family. He's gifting his daughter a rabbit for her birthday. They're sitting around the fire in the living room. It's the evening. They're all having a good time. He's hugging and loving on his wife. And Alex, watching this, gets so upset to the point that she gets physically sick and throws up. And during this process, when she threw the battery acid on the car, she even actually recorded a cassette tape, left it in a package, and left it on his seat for him to find, so he knew. I mean, obviously, he probably knew it was her regardless, because girl. But um, another thing that we see here that she does is when she kidnaps Dan's 6-year-old daughter. I will put out there 6-year-old daughter for those of you like me that may be a parent or just, are really protective over children. Child did not get harmed in the movie. So Alex kidnaps her. She kind of takes her to this amusement park for the day or whatever. And I believe this tactic is kind of just to reiterate the fact to Dan that she has and controls more power than he thinks she does. Okay. She has the access to get to him. She's going to pull out every stop and she will go after everything that means everything to him because he's what means most to her. And if she can't have him and if she can't have what means most to her, he can't have the things that mean most to him. And so we really see this power trip when she kidnaps. We really see this power trip when she kidnaps Ellen because it's all centered around instilling fear in Dan and reiterating the fact that she's the one running the show. And even when he thinks he may be figuring it out, she's always 3 steps ahead of him. Um, and then one of the other big things that happens in the movie, Dan takes his family away for the day to visit either his parents or their in-laws. And while they're away, Alex comes to the house and she kills Ellen, Dan's 6-year-old daughter, her new bunny she had just got for her birthday, brand new. She kills the bunny. She leaves it in a boiling pot of water on the stove. So when the family comes home, the pot is screaming like a tea kettle, it's going off. Ellen's running out to the backyard to the bunny hutch. She screams, no bunny in there. Next thing you know, Dan's wife's walking in the kitchen. She sees this pot on the counter and it's really ominous. She walks up to it and she lifts the lid off, and there inside the pot is the family bunny being boiled. So this is another one of these really big behaviors. And then lastly, I think probably like the most escalated, what all of these little instances and escalations were working up to this whole entire movie. Hex. I'm sorry. Like kimchi. My big boy Hex is attention seeker. He won't stop rubbing up on me because he wants to love it. Oh, and this is our new girl. No name yet. Besides baby, my daughter calls her baby cat. I get to see her cats all term, so I figured since they're being wild, I'll give the opportunity to show. Okay, anyways, back to scheduled programming. So the build up. So throughout the movie, we see all of these kind of behaviors, these events happening. Okay, it's escalating. It goes from some light stalking to obsessive calling to personal stalking to vandalizing a property to kidnapping his daughter to killing the family pet. Okay, it all leads up to this last huge event in the movie. Okay, and so this is where Alex actually breaks into Dan's home while they're there. His wife is drawing a bath, about to get a bath. She just came home from the hospital 'cause she wrecked her car while she's trying to look for Ellen when Alex had kidnapped her. Right, so they're they're there. She's drawing a bath. Okay, she's going to get in the bath. Next thing you know, boom, bada bing, bada bam. Alex is there in her bathroom with a big old butcher knife. Okay, these ladies get into it. Alex tries to kill Stan's wife. I think she was going in there with the notion, like, I'm just gonna kill her. We're gonna be together. That's how it's gonna be. Your daughter's mine now. Whatever, you know? So, um, it ends in this whole long kerfuffle. They're fighting. They're going back and forth. Dan's downstairs being an idiot. He got like music playing or something, so he don't even know his wife is in harm's way. Eventually he hears, he runs upstairs, okay? And then Dan and Alex are getting into it. Boom, 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 boom. Then Dan drowns Alex in the bathtub. He thinks she's dead. They're all just standing there. All of a sudden, she pops up out of the water with the knife, goes to stab Dan. Dan's wife shoots her, kills her, dead. Scene end, movie over. So that's how the movie ends. So all of this ultimately kind of building up to her downfall. Um, Lastly, I will just talk about some speculations that I may have. So, I just want to say with the diagnostic cri portion right here, and on this next slide, I'm going to get into the etiology of her disorder. I want to make very, 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 very clear to anybody who has not seen the movie. We get no context about Alex at all. There is literally no details in the movie besides the fact of her father dying in front of her at the age of 7. This is the only piece of information about her past or who she is or what she's been through that we ever get throughout the whole entire movie. Like that's it. There is nothing else. Okay, so because of this, I don't necessarily want to diagnose her with PTSD, but I have the feeling and I speculate inside that even the BPD didn't just come out of straight up from nowhere. I feel that throughout life and childhood, Alex has experienced some really extensive trauma in her lifetime. So I think it would probably be fair to say that she probably has some type of PTSD or like some trauma, some anxiety or mood disorder as well, not just BPD. But because we don't have too much information, we're not going to dissect that one right now. Okay, so next, etiology. Like I was just saying, very, very little information. So this made this part a little bit kind of hard with a lack of information, but I kind of just used context clues from the movie and just kind of really gathering information from really paying attention to Alex's speech, her body language, her emotions, her behaviors, kind of all these things throughout the movie that I could to kind of use psychological models to kind of formulate the reasoning psychologically of the answers we have of what would cause somebody to behave this way. So that's what we're really doing here with the lack of information. Um, I will say though that there is a new Fatal Attraction TV series. I have never watched it yet, so I know nothing about it. But I have heard through the grapevine that that series actually does get into a little bit of background about Alex and a pair, and from what I've been told, she does suffer extensive trauma early on in life. All right, so getting into kind of etiology, the first theory that I could think of that really kind of explains why Alex got BPD is the cognitive behavioral theory. Um, so as we can see, Alex really has no peers or role models to author her kind of like any healthy examples or behaviors. So she has really no role model, no example of behaviors or examples of healthy examples of relationships, anything like this. So this really contributes to creating a lack of self-efficacy in her. Um, as well as we see that her schema is constantly creating these strong feelings and emotions inside of herself, leading to her impulsive and destructive behaviors. And the schema, it's based off of her personal interpretation from what she picks up on other people's um, mannerisms, their social cues, their tone of their voice. She really internalizes how others kind of how they perceive or dissect her, view her. Um, she really internalizes the abandonment, the rejection, these types of things. And she comes up with these thoughts and it really internalize it. And in turn, it comes out in her violent actions. Um, the next theory that I think really hits mostly a lot with why Alex has borderline personality disorder would be the psychodynamic theory. Um, I think, subconsciously, Alex, she really craves like love, acceptance, belonging, safety, to be heard. Her need for these and her subconscious fear of rejection and abandonment really plays a part, I think, in her violent outbursts and the risky behaviors that we see her taking place with. Um, and we really see how she's like constantly at this like battle between her id and her super ego, and that this is really creating a distorted sense in who she is and really kind of diminishing a sense of who she is. So she really doesn't understand who she is as a person. There's this constant battle back and forth from who society thinks she needs to be and her not understanding who she is. Another thing that hits the mark for psychodynamic was her watching her father die early on in her childhood. I think that subconsciously watching her dad die, even though her dad didn't just like up and leave her. I mean, he passed away, right? But I think that subconsciously as a child, like Alex internalized that as when you're a child, that's kind of hard, right, to process. So I think if she didn't have the right person to kind of help her with that, she kind of internalized that as like my dad left me, you know? And even though it may be because dad's dead, may not have just like, abandoned you to go create a new family. Dad's dead, so he may not have meant to leave you, but still internally inside, since a child, like dad left me, and this is what she lives with, this is what she deals with. So that really instills that like a fear of abandonment in her because her father died and left her at such a young and early age. And I also picked up on the fact Alex never once speaks about her mom or any other family members in throughout the whole movie at all. So we have no idea about like we don't know, is the woman dead? Okay. But the fact that she never talks about her mother specifically or any other families, but I'm really going to touch on the mother because this is the one that's more important, right, in her formulating BPD. So I'm gonna think it's safe to assume, right, if Alex never sees her mom, she never calls her mom, never talks to her mom, never talks about her mother in the movie. Okay, either mom as well has passed away, or mom and Alex do not have a healthy relationship. They're not connected at all. They're completely disconnected and they probably don't have any type of relationship, which leads me to believe that there must be some unhealthy attachment or parenting style there. And Alex has experienced some type of trauma from her mother. that would make her not want to associate herself with her, especially after already experiencing the loss of the father. I could assume you'd want to lean into that other parent. But in this case, she did not, which leads me to believe there has to be some type of disruption there in that relationship, some type of hurt, some type of trauma. Um, and I think that has led to her having continued unhealthy attachment styles in her relationships and a consistent seeking of validation, even from unhealthy things. And I think that this also plays a role in her continued self-destructive actions and not having those caregivers there to teach her, to love her, to support her in that early childhood. I think in turn also is the reason why she has such a hard time processing and identifying the emotions that she's having and feeling, because nobody taught her about them or how to feel them, how to process them, and how we deal with these things in a healthy way. Um, s- Lastly, the another big thing that we see from the psychodynamics theory, I might be psychoanalytic too, but so would be defense mechanisms. We see a lot of defense mechanisms. So we're just gonna go off kind of on a tangent real quick. Regression is one. Oftentimes when we see Alex experiencing high amounts of stress or rejection, or being abandoned, things like that. We often see she acts out in a temper tantrum. And being a parent to a 4-year-old, I see this often, like when my child, um, she's very well spoken and things, but still at this age, right? It's hard to identify our emotions being that young, especially learned emotions. So my 4-year-old, when she can't identify an emotion or understand what she's feeling when she's overstimulated, when she's not being listened to or being heard, or like any of her needs basically are not being met. We see this in small children where they act out and they essentially throw like a temper tantrum and they might scream, they might cry, they might hit things, hit themselves. We see that often with Alex's behaviors. Every time she feels like she's being rejected by Dan, she starts acting out and represses to her childlike behavior in these little temper tantrums that she throws out. The next one, big one for her would be repression. She really represses and internalizes almost like everything about herself she keeps to herself, everything about her past she keeps to herself. Any traumas that she may be dealing with or having a hard time trying to kind of, work through, we don't know because she keeps it to herself. She represses all of that inside of her. Um, Another one that we C is denial. She's constantly in denial about Dan leaving her, about not even wanting to be with her. She's constantly in denial about the fact that he's not going to leave his wife. So denial is a really big one that we see coming all the way up through the whole entire movie. I mean, she denies the fact that Dan's going to leave her. Not happening. Another one that we see is displacement specifically when she kidnaps Dan's 6-year-old child, and also when she kills the helpless family rabbit to kind of um, displace some of the actions and things onto other people. And then lastly, another big one we see is her rationalization. So constantly we see her kind of like trying to be persuasive, manipulative with Dan. She's kind of trying to like justify her actions and her behaviors by telling Dan like her actions are only just reactions to his actions, and if he would be a responsible man and take care of their child and all of these things, then, like she wouldn't have to do what she's doing if he would just be a man, own up to it, treat her how she's supposed to be treated, and doesn't just toss her off to the side. So we really see that there, the rationalization of why her behaviors are justified, they're okay, and why Dan deserves to have these things happen to him. Lastly, the other kind of theory that really touches base a lot on the reason why Alex struggles with bipolar or with borderline personality disorder is the sociocultural theory. So we really see that Alex completely lacks social support and adequate resources. I mean, she has no friends, she has no therapist, she has no family. I mean, I get the sense society really views her as dangerous and crazy, and she lacks an identity role other than being an editor. But if you really look down into it, yes, this movie came out in 1987, so we were making some more progression, but still, if we think back on it on this time, and even today, still a lot, women are viewed as the caretakers. So from early ages, it's really instilled for some reason in Western civilization to women that our job is to grow up, find a good man, get married. We're supposed to have babies. We're supposed to, teach the babies. We teach them emotion regulation. We teach them morals. We teach them life skills, how to be a person. And we're supposed to be the nurturers of the home. Right, that's supposed to be the job. So I can see how this socially like really plays probably a big aspect into Alex's life because especially back then, it was even more so expected. So I think that because of the era that Alex is in, because of her age group, specifically too, being 40, it is not old, but when it comes to terms of having children, it is considered geriatric. She Her chances of being able to get pregnant, scientifically speaking, are probably less likely or going to be more difficult for her to obtain, and she's going to have a more high risk pregnancy. So we really see here, because of this, I feel like this probably drives a wedge even further with her isolation. I could assume that it's probably hard for her to make connections with other women because she's kind of like an enigma, right? She's single, not married, no children, 40 years old. She has a very demanding career. So she's really independent and she's really outside the societal like quote unquote norm for what most women in her societal status and her age group and her era would be. Um, and I think this plays like a really big role too because clearly when Alex is telling Dan she's pregnant and stuff, we really see that this is something that she wants, right? Or it might be fake wanting and attempts to keep him. Who really knows? But we'll go with the fact that she really did want the baby. So, um, we see that she wants the child, right? And she wants Dan, she wants the house, she wants the stuff. So I think that probably when she sees other women in society and she chose kind of like the career path and things like that, and maybe even too because of her mental health disorder, it may be hard for her to form a healthy relationship to create a family, you know what I mean? So I think that this probably causes a lot of sense of jealousy, and it kind of probably keeps her to tend to isolate from these people because she can't achieve what they have. She can't get to that point, and she probably thinks inside that she doesn't deserve it because of what has happened to her. So socially, Alex is very much so lacking. Next for treatment wise, really kind of the only I mean, not necessarily like only, but the one that's specifically for BPD, and really has the most research and evidence surrounding effectiveness, would be dialectical behavioral therapy. Um, Honestly, I would treat Alex with this for one because of the research of effectiveness for BPD. Um, But also because it's kind of like it's a client-centered talk therapy. So the client has a lot of control, they have a lot of say in their goals, their outcomes, and in kind of controlling the atmosphere of therapy. Um, and I think that with the fact like it occurs weekly for 2 to 3 hour sessions, all of those things, good points. DBT has a focus of four core main goals. Um, those would be number one, decreasing life-threatening behavior. Number two, decreasing therapy interfering behaviors. For someone like me, you really need that. Um, number three, improving quality of life. And number four, addressing underlying trauma, which I think that's really big for her too. Because I think that one of the biggest aspects here is it's very clear that Alex at some point has really suffered some probably extensive trauma. So I think that her trying to kind of uncover that underlying trauma and getting past some of those barriers is going to be really crucial for her and her treatment as well of her BPD because they kind of go hand in hand, right? Um, which is why DBT is a really good choice because it does have the aspects and components of prolonged exposure therapy, which is used to treat trauma disorders like PTSD. So if there is any like underlying trauma there that she's struggling with, this would be very beneficial for both her BPT and any trauma-related issues she may be having. Um, I think DBT is also a really great option because it helps the client form a healthy bond with their therapist, which can help the client increase feelings their self-efficacy, self-actualization, and experiencing unconditional positive regard, which I think is very beneficial to individuals who suffer with BPD because often one of the really main characterizations, right, of this disorder is either having a distorted sense of self or completely lacking your sense of self, like not knowing your identity, knowing who you are. So I think that having self-efficacy, reaching self-actualization, and experiencing unconditional positive regard is going to be really beneficial for these individuals who are trying to figure out who they are, who are trying to get a sense of self, a sense of worth. That's going to be a very big component for them and be beneficial. Another thing that's a really big characteristic and marker for BPD is their struggles with identifying emotions and inability to kind of like control these emotions, right? Um, that is a huge, huge, huge one. So I think that because DBT really emphasizes on emotional recognition and regulation, that is probably one of the most important aspects about treating a person with BPD. Because that's going to be one of the probably most immediate things you could try to work on and get through. Um, Also, in Alex Forrest's case specifically, I think because she really lacks a sense of community and connectedness with others, I think that because DBT also has a group therapy aspect to it, I think that would be really great for her to be able to be around other people who are experiencing a lot of the same things that she is. Even though we all may experience, I may have the same diagnosis as you, but we may experience it completely different, right? But there's going to be some aspects that we could still probably relate to each other on, even though we may experience it differently. We all have our own experiences, our own thought processes and things, but we are going to relate on some things. So I think that growing that community for her, having some people that can identify in some of the same type of like kind of quote unquote labels or if you will or whatever that she has can help her one build community, two have better support system peers and individuals around her, and three I think that that also can play a component part in helping figure out who she is as a person. Um, Other than DBT, there's not really much out there that's very researched or supported for the treatment of BPD. Um, The other things that kind of work are some things like if the patient was experiencing like another comorbidity, so we're talking about like another like a mood disorder or an anxiety disorder or a trauma disorder, then using aspects of other like cognitive behavioral therapies could be beneficial in the co-treatment of BPD with other disorders. The only other thing really that's used in treatment of BPD or alleviating symptoms of BPD would be psychopharmacologicals. And these would be things like, SSRIs, mood stabilizers, antipsychotics. Obviously, I know nothing about Alex Forrest, so I wouldn't be giving her. Also, I don't have a PhD, so I would not be giving her any type of um, psychopharmacologicals. It may be something that I eventually someday down the road would have information about and things like that. But I think if you were gonna want to give Alex psychopharmacologicals, there's really a lot of things that would have to come into play first, right? So for one, we're gonna need to really do a thorough assessment on her. We're gonna need an extensive background on her life experiences, where she came from, yada yada yada. We're gonna want a background on her medical health records, um, any information that we could possibly get regarding her parents and their medical mental health, and their background and upbringing, because as we know, things can be generational. Um, so I think that's a really big thing too. I think also taking into account, as long as the client is capable to make their own of sound mind decisions and things like that, I think taking into account really like what does the client want? What is their goals? Does the client want to explore psychopharmacologicals? Does the client want to explore doing talk therapy first and seeing how we are reacting to this before we're choosing to do some things like that? Does the client never want to do medications? So that's also something that we need to discuss with the client and make sure that it's something that they are capable. They are comfortable with. It is something that they are educated on and that they really understand all of the potential risks and benefits that come along with that. I think that those are all things we really need to take into account before just writing a prescription and throwing somebody on um, these types of medications because they can, I mean, just from personal experience, um, some of these medications I think can be very heavy on people. Um, My experiences with things like mood stabilizers and stuff were not great. I would never take them again. And there's a lot of different stories, a lot of different people, and it's kind of a trial and error and how they're feeling and stuff. So I definitely think that's something that like in my case, it's kind of something as a teen I was just kind of thrown onto with no knowledge or education surrounding the medication I was being given or how it would make me feel or how I could possibly react to it. So I think that really educating the patient on that, and really taking into account how they feel about those types of things is very important when making that type of decision. All right, lastly, my reflection. Okay. So I think that the movie Fatal Attraction did an extremely, very terrible and very harmful job at depicting BPD. I think that unfortunately, Alex's behaviors are extremely intensified in this movie too. And I think that really portrays her as and other individuals with BPD as psychotic, dangerous, and volatile, is really the sense that you get from this movie. Honestly, I think that like the lack in context to Alex's life prior to meeting Dan, and what her childhood experiences were like, I think all of that kind of leaving that big information out is just kind of creating this image that um Alex just so this some just random like out of nowhere crazy woman who's just obsessive and crazy for no reason. Like there's no context to it behind it. Like, you know what I mean? So, um it really gives this bad image of her when in reality she's more than likely probably just a woman who's been extremely traumatized, extremely mistreated, abandoned, neglected. She isn't seen, she's not heard by others. You know, she's just a person with a lot of pain and a lot of hurt who does not know how to deal with it and how to process it. You know, although trauma and adverse childhood experiences don't ever justify like the actions that take place in the movie, I don't think domestic violence, stalking, harming other people is ever justifiable. I think the only time violence could ever be justifiable is in an act of self-defense. If your life is really on the line, if you gotta defend yourself, I think that is the only time to justify putting your hands on somebody else. But I think aside from that, um, I just want to make it clear, I don't think violence is ever justified. So I'm not saying that giving this context is like justifying her behavior, but I'm saying that giving this context could at least help the audience be able to empathize with how she got to become the person she is because of what she dealt with growing up and throughout life. I think that giving that context and really putting light to that can really show um, how much trauma in real life really can and truly does impact individuals for a very long time, and how it really can be very much so a hindrance. Um, Honestly, I think that sadly, movies like this, they do well, right? They do well in Hollywood. Everybody wants to watch the crazy psych thriller movie. Everybody wants to watch the movie about the stalker. Everybody wants to watch the new true crime documentary about the most notorious serial killers. I mean, there's this weird fan fascination with these like aspects of psychology, yet at the same time, like the outcasting of these individuals. I don't really know how to like describe it. As people, you like to sit there, you like to watch the show, you like to take in um, the drama for your viewing pleasure. But when it comes to real life, real world, people tend to ostracize it and avoid these individuals. And I think because of the demand that is there and the views that these types of movies and TV shows and books and things like that get, unfortunately, they're not going anywhere. So I think that in movies like this and things like that, that really over exaggerate um, antisocial behavior and mental health disorders. Um, I think that they should have like credits, at the end or beginning of the movie. I think kind of like acknowledging, like, hey, like we acknowledge Hollywood and pop culture over dramatize the characteristics of certain disorders for cinematic effect. But here's some actual facts about that disorder. We may portray it like this, but really, this is what it really looks like in real life. And what we're doing here is just pretend this is just for dramatic effect for viewing likes. But in real life, it's really not how we're portraying it to be. And here is some information where you can educate yourself on what this really looks like and how we don't have to be afraid and ostracize these individuals. I think that if you're not going to stop creating the content, then at least being transparent, taking ownership of what you're doing, and at least providing factual information could possibly help mitigate at least a minimal amount of the maybe stigma or harm that could come from these types of shows and movies. Um, And at least for like people that are struggling with a mental health disorder, if you could put some kind of like message like that or something in there, like, hey, this is how we view it, but we know that it's really not like this. At least maybe for even the people that do struggle with those mental health disorders, when they do go in and they view these movies, they're like, oh, okay, like so they can at least have that sense of feeling of, okay, like Hollywood knows I'm not really like this. You know what I mean? They just like to portray my mental health disorder like this because people are interested. They like watching it on TV, you know? I don't know. But I think like that, I think just some basic education, maybe basic consultation from clinicians on set of your shows, your movies, your books you're writing to gather better information, consulting with individuals who actually have lived experiences of these types of things when you're creating a book, a movie, a show, or whatever it may be, to kind of depict them in a more better and accurate light would be a good step towards making some change, you know? Um, but yeah, I think that uh, all those could be very beneficial because I think a lot of things that society tends to forget, right, is that a lot of these disorders, a lot of these things, they're on a spectrum, right? So they're kind of like on a spectrum, and just because I'm diagnosed with something, you're diagnosed with something the same, doesn't mean we're going to present the same. Doesn't mean we're going to feel it on the same level. Um, so, I mean, even with ADHD, right? My work bestie, we both ADHD, the slew of other things, but um, the way our ADHD presents is different, right? Um, So I think people forget that is that everybody presents with these different disorders. Yes, there's similarities. Yes, there's criteria that's similar, but not everybody's going to have all the same criteria. Not everybody's going to have be presenting all of the same symptoms. They might present them in different ways. So you may have different ways of showing things. One person with ADHD might portray their hyperactivity with leg movements. But that's a big one, leg movements. Okay, but another person may they may portray it by pencil tapping or making noises or getting up and down and having to walk or doing things. So there's different ways um everybody kind of portrays these things. There's different spectrums, and I think that a lot of people forget that the most violent and volatile things like this is on one far, far end of the spectrum, and a very little few percentage of people really meet the criteria, become on that end of the spectrum. Most people are very low. They are not harmful. They're not out here killing people doing things, so I think that we forget about that, or like the society doesn't realize this because the media likes to cherry pick, right? The stories, the situations, the instances where people that may be on a more extreme end of a spectrum have done things. For instance, like Jeffrey Dahmer, Ed Gein, Ed Kemper, all of these people, right, that may be on the extreme end of ASPD. They're very, very rare, right? Very, very rare. But now ASPD and other things like this, they have this label of these are just terrible, volatile, murderous people because of the fact that the media has cherry-picked certain things that they want to report on. So I think that that all plays a very big aspect into all of this, and there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, and a lot of transparency, and I think a lot of advocacy that still needs to be done. But I think with individuals continuing to share their story, to continue being open and raw and real with themselves, I think is going to be really helpful. And I think, or I like to think that with the new generations, and I think a lot of the way I'm seeing. Gen Z and millennials kind of raise their offspring to be more open, to be more talkative about mental health and these type of topics. I would only hope that in the future with, how we're teaching the new generation of people to treat others and how we're educating them on topics like these and kind of trying to erase some of the stigma that hopefully we can instill these things in our children and do better generation by generation until eventually there hopefully one day isn't such stigma against people that, suffer from things like antisocial behaviors or personality disorders or things like that. Because at the end of the day, these people, they're not terrible people. These are just very hurt people that have had a lot of bad things happen to them. And because of that, they act out in these different behaviors or antisocially because it's their way of protecting themselves and it's how their bodies subconsciously taught them to protect themselves and it's learned behaviors that just need to be changed and they just need people to support them to not give up on them and to continue helping them through it. So that is my big old spiel on my critical thinking paper two or paper project. um I did enjoy doing this, had a lot of fun. It's my first time watching Fatal Attraction, believe it or not. So yeah, I think I might check out the series just to kind of see what's going on with that. And see if maybe after all the scrutiny that the 1987 film got for their depiction of BPD and how poorly they did at that and how harmful the movie was for individuals that suffer with BPD. I kind of want to check out the show just to see if they've maybe learned anything, taken anything away, and if they have made any changes and, um, you know, are advocating a little better. Um, and then lastly, we just have here my references. Most of my stuff I put in here was all kind of from our lectures we had and personal experiences and knowledge that I have, um, just with my own extensive stuff with mental health. Um, but I did read a few kind of articles just to kind of, fact check, review myself, make sure I knew what I was talking about, or refreshers, or just a little more context than what my notes had. I didn't use any like specific statistics or anything from any one specific paper or source or reference or whatever, but these I read all four of these, and all four of these do have empirical evidence and information regarding a lot of different talking points, therapies, and psychological models that I did speak on, and a lot of good information regarding BPD for anybody who is curious. Anyways, thank you for watching my presentation, and I hope that I at least taught you a little something.